When you think about self-improvement, one of the first things that comes to mind is strength training. It's very important for self-improvement, especially in the male sector. And for strength training, a training plan is extremely important. Actually, non-negotiable. And because of that, today I'm going to show you how to create a training plan. And then you can implement the training plan and successfully build muscle. Okay, in the first chapter we don't discuss the training plan itself, but we are going to discuss when are you training which muscles and how often are you training per week. Okay, a week has 7 days, and then you have to find out on which of these days I am able to train. And if you're very motivated, you maybe want to do 5 or even 6 days of resistance training per week. But you have to consider that it's very important to have 1 to 2 rest days per week. And the rest day is simply a day where you don't train, so your body can rest. Furthermore, it's important that you do for every muscle group. Muscle group is, for example, your chest or your back. For every muscle group, you need 48 to 72 hours of regeneration after your training. For example, training chest today and tomorrow again, because there has to be at least 1 day in between the 2 training sessions, and 2 would be even better. Something I also see very often people is that they, for example, today I train chest, tomorrow back, then my legs, then my arms, and so on. That is also inefficient, because every muscle should be trained 2 to 3 times per week. Your muscles should be trained as often as possible, so the frequency should be as high as possible, but under the condition that every muscle has 48 to 72 hours of regeneration after your training. An important reason for this is that the quality of your training is decreasing over time. So for example, if you do 4 sets of squats, the 4th set won't be as efficient as the first set, because your muscle is tired and can't perform very well. And because of that, splits are necessary. Okay, so let's at first clarify a very important question. How often should you train per week? I would say the minimum would be like 3 times per week. If 3 times per week is impossible for you, 2 times per week are also okay, but you should make sure it's at least 3 times a week. And the optimum would be like 4 to 5 times per week. Let's assume that you have chosen 3 times per week. Now you have to choose your split. In this case, I would recommend you a full body plan or an upper body, lower body split. As said before, you need to train every muscle 2 to 3 times per week. So while choosing your split, you have to keep that in mind. So you could train your entire body here your entire body, and here also your entire body. But in this case, you have to make sure that these days are distributed well in the week. But you might find that such a plan leads to too much exhaustion or even a drop in performance for you. In this case, an upper body, lower body split would be better, but the 3rd day of the week should be a full body plan, because by doing that you make sure that you train every muscle 2 to 3 times per week. So in this case, for example, you train your upper body on Monday, your lower body on Wednesday, and your full body on Friday. And if you, for example, train like 5 times per week, like me, then it looks different. And I personally have an upper body, lower body split, because by doing that, I train every muscle 2 to 3 times per week. Yeah, I really train every muscle 2.5 times per week. How's that possible? I train my upper body on day 1. Okay, so for example Monday, then on day 2 I train my lower body, my upper body, my lower body, my upper body, and then on the next week I start with my lower body, then my upper body, and so on. And by doing that, I train 1/2 of my muscles 3 times per week and the other half 2 times per week. And this switches every week. But on average, I train every muscle 2.5 times per week. And the split push-pull legs is very popular, but it makes no sense for most people. Actually, it only makes sense if you train 6 times per week, but very few people will want to do that. There's one thing you need to keep in mind when selecting your exercises. You not only need to train every muscle, but you also need to train every movement. As an example, we use the chest. What your chest muscles are doing, they move your arm forward. And there are different ways to do that. For example, you can do a bench press and then you can push a barbell up. And then you have moved your arms forward. But you can also make flies. And you also have moved your arms forward. And if you do dips, this is also a chest exercise. And these are different movements. And when you train chest, you need to do a pressing movement, a isolating movement, like for example cable flies or dumbbell flies, and a movement where you press down, like for example dips. I personally do for my chest dumbbell bench press, dumbbell flies and dips. And that's why I covered all the movements of the chest. And that's pretty much all you need to keep in mind. You should not only train every muscle, you should also train every movement. And I won't tell you what exercises you need to do, because there are no perfect exercises or something like that. And then choose the ones you like best. And then you can decide for yourself, do I want to, for example, do for my legs squats or leg press? For example, these are two identical movements and you can decide for yourself if you want to do squats or leg press. If you have chosen your exercise, you need to know some additional information about the exercise. For example, for barbell squats, you need a very low rep range, like 4 to 8 reps only. And for lateral raises or calf raises, high rep ranges would be optimal. And you should also consider how long your rest period should be. Generally, you could say the harder the exercise, the longer the break. I think that makes sense. So let's tackle this with an example. At first you write down every muscle group and then you write down every movement for this muscle group. For example, for your back, it would be a horizontal pulling and a vertical pulling. And then you choose your exercise for, or maybe even your exercises if you want to. But of course it has to fit into your training plan. And here you, for example, type in barbell rows. And here you do, for example, pull-ups or lat pull-downs. Okay, so after choosing your exercises, you of course need to implement these into your training. And you want to know how to arrange them. At first you should do the harder exercises as early as possible in your training, because your performance shrinks in your training over time. I think that makes sense. And if you do lateral raises and then calf raises and so on, and then you do squats as your last exercise in the training, I think you know that your performance for the squats won't be very good. But if you do calf raises at the end of the training, your performance will not really be any less, because calf raises aren't a very hard exercise. And furthermore, calf raises are an isolation exercise. Squats train nearly every muscle in your legs, your quadriceps, your hamstrings, your calves also a little bit, and of course your glutes. And your back and your abs are also stimulated. So squats train a lot of muscles in your body. But calf raises, they only train calves. So compound exercises that train a lot of muscles should be very early in the training, and isolation exercises that only train one muscle should be at the end of your training. And after you've arranged your exercise, you want to know how many sets you should do for each exercise. To do so, you should note the following: 12 to 20 sets per muscle group per week are optimal. And if you train like 3 times a week, this is probably not possible. Then you should target for at least 8 sets per week per muscle group. And then you probably do about 3 sets per exercise. Of course, you have to look at your training split. With a full body plan, you'll probably have to do 2 sets per exercise to make sure you get all the movements in. Now let's look at something that is very often neglected but is very important. Warming up. Firstly, you need a warm-up for every training. That's like 5 to 10 or even 15 minutes. There you jog a little bit and maybe you do some arm circling or jumping jacks and so on. And you're welcome to watch a warm-up on YouTube for this. So you don't have to do hard squats straight from sitting down or even laying on your bed. And then you have to do 1 to 3 warm-up sets before each exercise. For example, for squats, I do 3 warm-up sets because it's a very hard exercise and my body needs a lot of warm-up for this, because for squats you use a lot of weight and my body needs to get used to this before it can perform well. And for isolation exercises like calf raises or lateral raises, of course you can do just 1 warm-up set. You don't have to do 3 warm-up sets before lateral raises. That just would be unnecessary. And warm-up sets are simply sets where you use less weight than for your work sets. So if your work set with which you want to gain muscle mass is 100 pounds, you maybe do a warm-up set with 50 pounds and then you do a warm-up set with 80 pounds. And your warm-up as well as your warm-up sets are extremely important and non-negotiable. The first reason is that without warming up, your injury risk will be very high. And you don't want to be that guy who, as he turns 30, gets shoulder pain and then can't move his arm anymore. And you also don't want to get any serious injury. So warming up is very important to minimize the risk of injury. But apart from that, warming up is also important for your performance. If your body is ready for the work it has to do, it will be able to perform much better than if you have sets on your table for 3 hours and then you bench pressing or shoulder pressing or squats. Okay, so in chapter 4 we do a final check. First you need to check the duration of one training session, and this duration you can get of course by doing your training plan, but you can also very easily calculate your training duration. When I calculate it, then I use 1 minute per set as a guideline. Of course your sets can take more than 1 minute or less than 1 minute, but 1 minute is a good guideline for my training. And of course you also need to calculate in your rest that every set has and your warm-up, and then you should come to about 60 to 90 minutes. And if your training duration is under that number, you can add additional exercises or sets to your training, and if your training is more than 90 minutes long, then you'll have to cut something back. Then I will check if my training is efficient as the way I structured it. So for example, if you're training in the gym, then you should perhaps make sure that all exercises on the, for example, on the cable tower are done one after the other. So your training plan is efficient and well thought out, so you don't have to wait for 30 minutes before you can use a machine or something like that. Okay, now you have all the knowledge you need to make your training plan. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe to my channel. And then apply what I showed you in this video and successfully build muscle.